And when I went home and I, told my mom what happened, her response, which God bless her, her response to me was, "Well, you don't need people. You don't need people." And to me now, like that's so shocking. But at 9, when your parent tells you something like that, which just seems like the gospel truth, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I don't need people. And so from that moment, like literally my personality flipped overnight. I used to be someone who was very gregarious. My mom would tell me these stories. I would chat up strangers and, all these things, to just feeling so afraid of people and feeling like people aren't safe.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. Claudine is a Catholic convert, physician, trauma-certified life coach, and somatic practitioner. She helps Catholic women heal their heart wounds and embody their feminine genius so they can step into their God-given mission and become who God created them to be. But before Claudine shares her story, here's a review from Christina. Grateful you are sharing these stories. Heather, thank you for sharing your diagnosis and recovery journey with breast cancer. We share some similarities with your story, and it has opened my eyes. I'm so sorry you had to endure so much trauma and healing, but what you are sharing here is powerful. It's supportive. It's life-giving. So thank you. Keep up the good work. I'll be listening in. Christina, thank you so much for your kind words. And I agree, it is so powerful when we come together to share our stories, and it's definitely life-giving. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Who knows? I just might read your review next. And then after you leave your review, come join us in the Warrior Words community at facebook.com/groups/Warrior Words. After you hit that request button, please answer the few questions that pop up, and I look forward to getting to know you in there. So grab a tissue and join Claudine and me as we discuss heart wounds and the intersection of faith and healing. Let's rock. Well, welcome, Claudine, to the Warrior Words podcast. I'm so happy you could join us today.
Hey, Heather, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be here with you.
Oh, well, thank you. I have been, or you have been in my inbox for years, and I have been following you for a while. I was trying to think of where, how I got on your email list, but I can't remember when that was. But excuse me, you have graced my inbox. And one thing that had always struck me about you is your femininity. And you always look so beautiful, and you're always so beautifully dressed. And I think that's kind of a lost, maybe not lost, but it's something that's just not as prevalent in today's society. And I think it needs to come back. We need some more femininity.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, one of the things that we talk about here on the Warrior Words podcast is we go from trauma to survival to thriving. And that's something that I've noticed in your story and on your website, is that you kind of started out in childhood with a little bit of childhood trauma. And I was wondering if we could start there and you could share that part of your journey with the audience.
Yeah, so The first thing I think I want to share is that I'm a daughter of immigrants. Both of my parents are from Jamaica. And even though I was born here, my sister was born here, we were very much raised in a Jamaican community. And it was really nice. There was a Jamaican Pentecostal church that was a big focal point of our lives, and pretty much all of the people that were in our lives, my mom's friends, my father's friends, they were all part of this very tight knit, sort of small community where you sort of knew everyone. And so that's a very important part of my story, because I think anyone who has an experience of being an immigrant from another country, there's sort of that feeling of not quite fitting in with the culture, right? Not quite being the same as everyone else. The food is different, and the language, even though we speak English, the dialect, the patois, and and all those things. So there was that. The other thing is my mom is still very much this way. She's a very cautious person, very, maybe anxious about the world in general. And I really picked up a lot of that, I think, from her as well. So she raised us to be very, very sheltered, which in hindsight, I can also recognize there was some good in that, because I think now these days that people are talking more about their trauma and their experiences, we see how much darkness has been going on for a while that was really hidden. And she was very much aware of the possibility of evil. So she really tried to protect my sister and myself. She worked really hard to send us to Catholic school, even though we weren't Catholic. She really protected us. We couldn't really go do sleepovers, and we couldn't do those kind of things. Boys were absolutely forbidden. And so yeah, and so she really tried to protect us to the best of her abilities. And while I can see the good in that, I can also see that that also didn't serve me in some other aspects as well. And so when I talk about the big trauma that happened for me, I always, when I share this story, I always feel a little bit silly saying it, because I'm an adult and I am talking to another adult, and I can see the silliness of it, right? But when you are 9 years old and you're going through that experience, it's not quite the same. And so I skipped a grade, and it was always very kind of strange to me that my fourth grade teacher asked me, she didn't have a conversation with my parents. She kind of called me onto the hall one day and said, you're doing really well in school, and I think you should consider going to the next grade. And I asked my sister, who was 2 grades ahead of me. I was like, can I ask my sister? And went and talked to her, and she was like, I don't know. And so I was like, I guess, and I packed up my little desk and went literally across the hall to the fifth grade. And what happened is, stood up in the front of the class, the teacher introduced me, and that was fine. But when I walked back to my new seat, the strap of my backpack got caught on someone else's chair. And I can see the humor in this. I'm trying to move forward, and I'm kind of stuck, and it's a little comical as I see it now. But I didn't realize that my strap was caught. I was probably just flustered with the newness of everything, and the whole class laughed at me. Now, when you're 9 and that happens, it's like a very I can sort of feel like my soul kind of left my body. That's experience of dissociation, right? And now I have language for that. I didn't when I was 9, but I just remember walking to my chair and just kind of sitting down and just kind of, let me just keep my head down and let me just, get through today. And when I went home and I, told my mom what happened, her response, which God bless her, her response to me was, well, you don't need people. You don't need people. And to me now, like, that's so shocking. But at 9, when your parent tells you something like that, which just seems like the gospel truth, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I don't need people. And so from that moment, like, literally my personality flipped overnight. I used to be someone who was very gregarious. My mom would tell me these stories. I would chat up strangers and, all these things, to just feeling so afraid of people and feeling like people aren't safe. And because they're not safe and I don't need them, I better just take care of myself. I better just stick to myself. So for pretty much, and that was a K through 8 school. So I was with that class from 5th grade to 8th grade. And I very much kept to myself. I did well in school, that, that continued, but I really just didn't trust people. And so it was very hard for me to open up to make friends at that point. And there was this one moment in 7th grade where I don't know, the stars aligned and I was in like this group of 4 people and somehow it was like we were close and I felt like, oh, this feels kind of nice to have, friends. But of course, 8th grade, the whole thing, shuffles and different classroom, different teacher. And yeah, so this really persisted though throughout like most of my adult life. So I went to an all girls high school, and then adding to the fact that that was a predominantly white school. So I felt like I stuck out for, other reasons now. And then I went to college, and the experience that I had at college was going from this predominantly white school to now, it was a good university, but at that time, I remember making a very conscious decision that I wanted to be more in like the Black community. And so I felt like, oh, I don't quite fit in the Black American community either because I'm this Jamaican. And then I went to this predominantly white high school. And now I don't really quite have the Black American culture experience either. So that was also a little bit different for me. And then again, it just kind of persisted eventually to grad school, med school, etc. And so for me, all throughout this experience, I would recognize these points where I was like, this isn't normal. Like it's very hard for me to kind of relate to people, to engage with people, to form these deeper friendships. But there would be these moments of grace along the way where I would meet a friend here, and these are people I'm still friends with today, a friend here, a friend there. And it's almost like they would see me and like pursue me, if that makes that makes sense. Like they saw something in me that I didn't quite see at that point and recognize my goodness and recognize that. And I'm very grateful for those moments and those experiences because ultimately that's what kind of helped me along the years until I got to go ahead. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I try not to interrupt, but what you said there though, you had kind of closed yourself off.
Yes.
And, and so these people were able to come and see something in you because you weren't in a position, or at least maybe you felt like you weren't in a position to reach out to them because you didn't need people.
Right.
And so now these people are maybe coming and chipping away at that wall just a little bit. And the other thing is that you don't need people. I say in my intro, your words are powerful.
Oh, yes.
And those simple words just changed a trajectory for you. And they were very powerful for you and shifted your life.
Yeah, it really did. And I remember when I was, writing this all out for Sacred Wounds, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe my mom said that. Like I knew she said that to me, and I had done a lot of work around this anyway. But just like seeing it in writing for some reason just made it even more, like you said, our words are very powerful. Scripture has so many verses that remind us of the power of our words, and by our words we will be justified, by our words we will be condemned, and all kinds of things. And so yeah, and I know with my mom's own history and her past, I know where those words came from, and I know she had experienced being hurt by people. And that's the thing with trauma. A lot of trauma is relational, and we sort of learn from those experiences in different relationships. It could be familial, it could be romantic, it could be platonic, whatever. That if we are harmed in a relationship, it erodes that trust in wanting to form relationship again, right? Opening up ourselves up to that possibility.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then you carry it with you. I was talking with another guest recently about how, when we have this one lie or this one, I don't want to say truth, or one thing that we believe about ourselves or we believe about our place in the world, that then goes forward and impacts every single other one. So you have this cycle, and the first one's not based on an actual truth. Because
Right,
as a 9-year-old, you didn't know that you didn't need people,
right.
but now as an adult, you know that. And, all of these other truths that you believed about yourself
Hmm.
or that you believed about the world weren't really true because they were based on that one set of words that you carried
Yeah,
through.
it's true. And this is really one of the fascinating things about our brains and our nervous system is that there's so much information that comes to us, like millions of bits of information that our brain can't possibly process all of it. So it actively filters out things that are not relevant. And what's relevant or not relevant, well, it's the things that we already believe to be true or the experiences that we've already had. So once we have a belief, like coming from a parent that we take as fact, or we have an experience of being laughed at by the class, right? We have these filters that are kind of set up, and we start seeing the world almost like those rose-colored glasses, or put any other colored glass on that you want, right? We start seeing the world through those filters, and it's not that there weren't moments of good or that there weren't good people around me. I couldn't see them because my filters were set up for people are dangerous, you're going to get hurt, you can't trust people. So that's what I was essentially filtering. And it almost feels like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point, or we're just kind of attracting and drawing in those experiences to ourselves. Because the other thing is we can't be wrong in our experience. Like we have to be right. So we will literally create the evidence, we will look for the people who actually are going to hurt us, or we'll go for the relationships where we know that person isn't right for us, but we have to prove ourselves right. So we go for that person who's going to confirm, oh yeah, people are dangerous, but you kind of knew that already, right? And it's just like, and it just, what's the word, it like anchors it in even more. Yeah.
That's oh that that's just such a it's such a maybe a scary realization, that we'd rather be
Yes.
right and
Yes.
hurt
Yes.
than
And
be
happy.
happy and wrong.
It's true. It's true. There's
Oh,
a part of our brain called it's the reticular activating system, and this is where that sort of science part comes in, that nerd part for me. But yeah, that's the part of the brain that's like literally scanning the environment for things that confirm what you already believe to be true. And so if you've ever like maybe there's a car that you want, a particular make and model and color, all of a sudden have you noticed you start seeing that
yes.
car like everywhere? And it's not that suddenly everyone's driving that car. It's that part of the brain, that RAS, that's literally looking for that car so it can show it to you and say, here's that car, here's that car. Because that's now what your filter is set towards. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I always wondered why that happened. As soon as I got a Honda, I started seeing Hondas everywhere. And, as soon as I just got a yellow car, and now it's like yellow's not the most popular color to drive, but I'm seeing them everywhere.
Right, right. It's very funny.
It
But
is so funny. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned nerding out on this, and you also mentioned your faith. So I am going to pull out a quote that I mentioned to you before we turned the recording on. And as I was looking at your website, I saw that it said, "This is where faith and neuroscience meet." So how did you go from? You've mentioned grad school, you've mentioned medical school.
Mhm.
How did you weave your faith and going for higher education and becoming a doctor? How does that all come together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I'm really grateful for my upbringing, even though now that I'm Catholic, I'm still very grateful for that Pentecostal background because I feel like that's my foundation, that's my core. I had my mom, still have my mom's prayers and people, in our church community from the past, praying for me in a powerful way. And I think that kind of adds a different element to my Catholic faith now. But I just really believe that going to Catholic school, even though I wasn't Catholic, but going to Mass and at least participating, even though I wasn't receiving communion, but getting catechized essentially or formed, right, through religious education. And I actually went to a Catholic high school too, so that's K through 12. There were always these moments where I know God was always with me through all of it. And even though when I got to college, like a lot of people, I stopped going to church, like not because of this rebellion or just revolting against religion. It wasn't anything like that. But I just remember just having that sense of, well, I can have a relationship with God personally. I can continue to do that. And I would go to church here and there, and I was engaged with like the Bible studies and the gospel choir and things like that, and just living in a way that my mom raised me, right? Not losing sort of those morals and standards. Like I actually didn't drink until I was 21. Like I'm probably that weird girl who actually, it's not legal, so I'm not going to have a drink until I'm 21. So yeah. So just, yeah, all of those things, like just like squeaky clean kind of person. And I'm grateful for that again. But I realized that God was with me through all of it, even though I wasn't always, necessarily going to church or anything like that. But just to fast forward to what led to me really coming back to that was, yeah, through medical school, through residency, it was challenging. It was challenging. And I ended up in a residency where it just wasn't a good fit. I realized that like the issues that I had with some of the personalities in the program, it wasn't like a flesh and blood issue, like scripture tells us. It's like we're dealing with powers and principalities, right? We're dealing
Yes.
with evil that is coming in the form of people, right? And so I remember one night being on call and I was Googling prayers for spiritual warfare. And I literally put that in Google. And like the first thing that came up was the St. Michael prayer.
Mhm.
And you have to realize I'm not Catholic, but I remember looking at that prayer and I was like, this sounds pretty powerful. And it was an angel. And I was like, well, I believe in angels and I have a guardian angel. And I remembered having that guardian angel prayer in my room. So I was like, I'm okay with this. I can pray that prayer. And to make a long story short, I was probably making some sort of novena to St. Michael. I didn't know. But I decided to leave my residency program and start applying to other programs. And it was like the deadline that I needed to tell my current program if I was going to stay or go. The day before that, I got accepted to another residency program. So I just knew on some level that it was through this prayer. I was reading like the Psalms 37, Psalms 31, like all these like serious like warfare, prayers and Psalms. And I knew that again, this was through God's hand. And I ended up moving. The apartment that I found happened to be 2 blocks away from the Basilica, not a coincidence.
No.
And at that point, I didn't know it. It was like the first day I'm coming home from the program, the shuttle bus drops me off and I see this garden and I'm like, oh, what's this garden? I walk into the garden, it's attached to the Basilica. It was the John Paul II garden. And yeah, so that to me was just like one of those like light bulbs start going off. And I decided to look into RCIA. And that's what sort of brought me to this point. And I really feel that it's my faith and joining the church and receiving the Eucharist finally, and going to adoration. To me, that was really the fuel that helped me to see some of these deeper wounds that I can recognize them on some level, but at the same time, I didn't really have the tools to really start healing them. So it actually was the year after I converted. So 2013, I started working with a life coach and started really processing through some of these traumas and yeah, taking a deep dive into personal development. Now, a lot of personal development is secular, right? And at that time, there weren't a lot of Catholic life coaches or, Catholic mindset coaches, or that just wasn't a thing back then. So I would do the secular programs, and then I would like, okay, I can't go down that road. That sounds new age, or that sounds a little wonky.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go down that road, but I would sort of integrate my faith with the things that I was learning. And when I discovered the nervous system, because this all happened in layers, right? It was, a lot of the mindset stuff, and then more like what I call the feminine genius stuff, like the feminine energy stuff. That's sort of what they call it in the secular world. And then a lot of the somatic and nervous system stuff. I feel like that was really the final piece that really clicked everything in together. And of course, I could see God's hand in all of it. Like, of course, He created our bodies. He knows us so intimately. He created our nervous system to work a certain way. The dysregulation makes complete sense in light of what I've been through in the past, in light of what all of us have been through in the past. And it's really understanding it through that lens, through the lens of a loving Father who's trying to help us survive and ultimately thrive. That's just sort of how I put all of it together.
Well, I like how you describe it, because it's almost like, I know a lot of people don't like the phrase, but and I know it's attributed to Saint Mother Teresa about how God doesn't give us more than we can handle. And I think I think that what really should be attached to that is more than we can handle without him.
Yes, yes.
But it reminded me of that as you were speaking, because you got it in layers.
Yes.
You started learning about your faith, and then you started learning about the different ways the brain processes the trauma, the neuroscience. And as you put all those pieces together, then
Right.
they all started to make sense and work together for you. And I love how he just worked that way for you. Because if he gave it to you all at once, or if you got the neuroscience piece before you got the faith piece, it might
Yeah.
not have you might not have been able to do the work that you're doing now, and the feminine genius, and the working with the heart wounds, and I think it's just so beautiful that he's woven it together this way for
Yeah.
you.
And I usually say I was just following the divine breadcrumbs. Like, and I really
Yes.
feel like, yeah, and I feel like this isn't unique to me. This is all of us, right? He's giving us our Father says, give us this day our daily bread, right? So he's not overwhelming us with too much, and he's not giving us not enough. He's giving us exactly what we need from moment to moment, from day to day. And I feel like it's the same with our healing. Like, ultimately, he sees the whole expanse of our life and our experience. And of course, he sees it all. But he knows, like, yeah, she's not maybe ready to handle this part of the journey yet. So I'm just going to, let's get the faith piece, because that's going to be the foundation that we're going to build this all on, right? Is that conversion, and then nourishing with the Eucharist, and getting the devotion to the rosary and to the Eucharistic adoration, and really building upon all of that, and then sprinkling in, okay, well, here's this wound that I'm gonna illuminate for you so that you can see this needs healing, and oh, here's that wound, right? And for me, healing is a lifelong journey. Like, I don't think there's like an end point that I'm like trying to get to. I'm just going with the flow. Like, there's always new things that are coming up based on what's happening around me in the world, in my life, in my family, in my relationships, all those things. And I notice it, like, oh, okay, I'm seeing that I'm bringing this to confession a lot, or I'm struggling with this emotion,
Mhm.
and okay, Lord, I hear you. I see that this is something now I need to work through with you.
Mhm. Yes, and it's that with you part. Yes.
Yes,
Wow.
yes,
So tell us a little bit about, because you said, when you first started back in 2013, so that's 12 years now, almost 12 years,
yeah,
that there weren't Catholic mindset coaches or Catholic life coaches. And that's what you do now, right?
yeah,
That's essentially, you're a life coach.
yeah.
Would that be so tell us then, how did you decide then that that's what you wanted to do going forward?
Yeah. So I think what inevitably happens is when you go through a transformation, whether that's a religious transformation or discovery of, rediscovery of your faith, or you go through a healing experience, whether that's through therapy or spiritual direction or coaching or some combination of all of it. It's almost like there's this fire that's inside of you. And I remember when I converted, it was the same thing. I started trying to convert my whole family, and then I realized, okay, I had to scale that back because they weren't there. But it's so interesting because my sister, she's constantly asking questions now about the church. I just random questions, right? And I just answer her, and I just move on. I don't belabor it. But anyway, so um so yeah, at that time it was just this fire, like I want to help people. And even though yes, I'm a doctor, I was helping people in a sense in that way, but I just felt like this was a very different invitation, that God was asking me to do something else. And that's the thing, it took time for me to really refine what that was, because initially, like I said, there were really no Catholic life coaches at the time. There were coaches, but it didn't explode like it really did after the pandemic. I feel like 2020, everyone was at home. People were really doing a lot of internal work and really discovering coaching on a broader scale, at least from my perspective. And so at the time, I just felt so, I don't know, afraid to really come out and say I was a Catholic life coach. Or so I would say, oh, I coach women of faith. It was all very vague. And I just wasn't confident. And I remember going to a business conference right before the pandemic, and people are like, so what do you do? And I just felt so much, I don't know, embarrassment. And I was like, oh, this probably sounds really weird. And so yeah, so it took me a good like year and a half or so, 2 years, to really get really more clear that no, I actually want to coach Catholic women, because that was really my journey. And it's such a big part of my life. It's really the foundational piece. And so I realized I really want to work with other women like me. And then there was a moment where I sort of put feminine genius to the side because it wasn't feeling quite aligned. And it was a good year and a half where I just wasn't doing anything in my business, and I was working on coaching other physicians on burnout. And so I was doing that for about a year and a half. And then just very powerfully, I felt God like just drop it right back. I think it was July the 31st of 2022. And that's when I like created my heart safety guide in like a day. Things just start to flow out of me again, like, content and all of these things. And that's when it really started to feel more like a calling, more of a mission. And that this is, at least for this season, what God was inviting me to do. And so now that's been further refined. So as I did mindset, as I did more like feminine energy, feminine genius work, as I learned more about the subconscious mind and processing, and then eventually the somatics and the embodiment, the nervous system regulation, all of that just sort of refined my practice. And now I do really this combination of it all. And I call it like integrative Catholic life coaching, because I really believe that we don't just coach to someone's mind, and we don't just speak to their spirit, and we don't just speak to their bodies and the traumas and things that they hold. We're speaking to all of it. And it's all because we're a reflection of the Holy Trinity. So we're mind, body, and spirit. And so I can't just separate out, oh, it's only a mindset issue, or it's only a spiritual issue, or it's only a somatic issue. It's usually some combination of all three. Now, there may be different ratios depending on what we're working on in a particular moment or session. Mm-hmm. But what I have found is really integrating all of that to be the most powerful for me, but also for my clients.
It's wonderful. I have to admit, I don't know as much about the whole somatic side of things.
Yeah.
But I am open to learning.
Yeah.
I'm open to learning that. Yeah, that would be definitely new for me. And it's ironic because in college I was pre-med and I was a biochem kind of person, and then I discovered psychology.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so,
Well, I was joking earlier. I I feel like I missed my calling as maybe a psychologist or a psychiatrist, potentially. But I'm like, we're good. We're good right here. God is putting all these random pieces together that don't
Right.
seem to fit. He's making them fit. So
God is good.
yes, yes,
Yes,
he
he is.
is. He is.
So, well, one of the things that I like to talk about, and you've dropped those breadcrumbs along the way,
Yeah.
but I like to talk about beauty, and I think that really goes hand in hand with the femininity that I see in you and that I see on your website. Not that beauty has to be feminine, but I think that they are linked. Um, but if you could look back and see maybe one or two specific moments that really stood out to you as moments of beauty as you traveled from you don't need people
Mm.
to now you want to help women, specifically Catholic women, because that's a huge journey there.
Uh,
But
it is. And, I'm thinking about that verse, how God creates beauty from ashes, and how he's really the only one who can do that, right? Who can take a horrible death like a crucifixion and have it be the source of our salvation, right? And
right.
and the means of restoring our connection with God. And so there's definitely a beauty in that. There's a beauty in the suffering, there's a beauty in the wounding, there's a beauty in the passion. And it's like we can only see that when we can see it more clearly. Let me say it that way. We can see it more clearly when we're heading to the other side of it. Doesn't mean we need to be completely on the other side of the wounding, but we're heading in that direction, and we can look back and see, okay, this was a bad experience, but if I actually didn't have that experience, I wouldn't have had all of these other positive experiences after that, right? Maybe I wouldn't have met this particular person. Maybe I wouldn't have become Catholic, right? If I didn't go through that experience in residency, I don't know if I would have gone and become Catholic, because that really was the ignition for that whole journey. So if I
Mhm.
never moved to Baltimore, I have no idea what would have happened, right? And so for me, the beauty is really recognizing that, first of all, God doesn't make mistakes. And if he is allowing suffering, not he doesn't cause it, but if he's allowing us to experience some suffering, that's because he knows that there's something on the other side of it that he's going to get out of that, right? He's going to somehow get the glory, and ultimately that's what we want to do, is to give that glory back to him. It's not because of me, and it's not because of the coach or whatever. It's because of him bringing me through that and getting me to that other side and helping me to see the truth of myself and the truth of people, that yeah, people are good. Not everybody, but overall we're fundamentally good, I believe, because that's
Yeah.
what God said when he created us.
Right. And we're
And
made in his image, right?
we're made in his
So
image. Yeah. And that even if it can feel like, yeah, some people are going to feel unsafe or actually be unsafe for you. Not everybody's going to be safe for
right,
you.
right.
But that wasn't true, that I don't need people. We're made for connection. That there's a reason we're all born into a family, right? We don't get
Right.
dropped from the sky by the stork
Right.
like like our parents maybe told us when we were too young to know the truth. But that yeah, there's a reason that he created this ecosystem of how the world, sort of functions together, and how we fit in that world, and how we fit with one another. And so for me, I'm going to say my conversion was definitely one moment of beauty um, in my life, that I can, very clearly see God's hand in that, and guiding me through that. And for me, that's really going to be the probably the seminal moment, because I really feel that everything just flowed from that point. And if I had to identify another moment of beauty, I don't know that I could just put this all into one particular moment, but I think really just coming into my own as a woman and as a daughter of God, and just my identity as a woman, because I think well, we know from Genesis that there's this warfare between, Satan and Our Lady, who is the representation of femininity and the feminine genius par excellence. And so Satan hates women. Clearly, he hates women.
Yeah.
And so he does everything in his power to make us doubt our worth and our enoughness and our beauty, and not just physical beauty, but just inner beauty. And I think really coming to that place of healing that part of my femininity, and really believing all of those things that God tells me about myself through scripture. To me, again, it's not one moment that I can identify, but I'm going to say that whole journey and process.
And that is beautiful beauty. Yes. So if people would like to work with you, how can they come find you?
Yeah, so my website is www.embodiedcatholicwoman.com. And yeah, that's really where I speak to this idea of embodying our feminine genius and ultimately becoming who God created us to be. Because that to me is the end goal and the purpose. It's not becoming embodied for embodiment's sake. It's not becoming healed for just the sake of healing, but it's ultimately to do what God has created us to do, because He created each one of us with a mission and a purpose. And yeah, it's just a matter of healing enough and figuring out what that is so we can go do it.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm going to make sure that I put your website in the show notes. And I think you mentioned that you had had a gift for our listeners.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to share with your listeners the Heart Safety Guide, which was that guide that I mentioned that I created when I had that reinvigoration in my business in 2022. But it's essentially a 13-page workbook where I really help Catholic women to see some of the areas where they may have trauma. And I know trauma is such a loaded word, and oftentimes people don't resonate with trauma if they haven't had the big T trauma experiences, but it can be so simple. It could be like being laughed at in front of the school, or it can be, you know, being teased. It can be your parents divorced, you had a sick parent, so many things. And so in the Heart Safety Guide, I really see that as an introduction for Catholic women to understand how they may have heart wounds, and then to start that process of really healing them.
Wonderful. I will also put that in the show notes as well so they can pick that up. And just one last thing, if you have any warrior words that you would like to speak directly to the women, the audience who are listening to this episode.
Yeah. I think what's coming to mind to share as we close this is just a reiteration of seeing the beauty in the wounds, and in the sufferings, and in the scars. And sometimes we look at our wounds as something bad, or something, shameful, or even dirty, like, oh, I shouldn't have gone through that, or I'm a terrible person because I went through that. But a reminder that our Lord, He retains His wounds in heaven as marks of love for us. And so to me, that's a powerful reminder of the redemptive nature of our wounds, and that it doesn't have to be a handicap. It doesn't have to be something that's holding you back or preventing you from moving forward, or even feeling like a victim. That it can actually be the springboard, the starting point for a radical new beginning in your life, if you're willing to see it that way, and to, do the work to move beyond that.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you so much.
Claudine, just thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing that journey with us. Because you mentioned the big T trauma versus some of the smaller traumas, but as you also mentioned, when you were 9, it's not a small trauma to a 9-year-old.
No, it's all big to you when you're 9.
Exactly. And it framed so much of what you were to go through for the next decade or so. And so I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think it can get confusing when we talk about trauma, and people are like, well, that's not trauma.
Right.
I don't, that doesn't matter. I don't matter because I didn't have a big trauma. So
It
I
doesn't
want to,
count.
right. It doesn't count. Exactly. And so I thank you for being willing to share, um, and being vulnerable, and then just being so gracious with your story and your journey through all of this. So thank you for coming on and sharing with
Thank
us today.
you. Thank you so much, Heather. I really appreciate having this conversation with you.
Your words are powerful, my friends. That's the phrase I say at the end of my intro. Not because it's a cute, memorable saying, but because it's true. The Bible talks about the power of our words in several places in Proverbs. And then there are several mentions in Hebrews, Thessalonians, Ephesians, James, Colossians, the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, Ecclesiastes, 1 Peter, Titus, Isaiah, Job, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Philippians, and the Psalms. And I may have missed some, but that's a lot of books. So what that tells me is that the power of your words bears repeating over and over again. And it's something to which we need to pay attention. Those well-meaning words, possibly meant to comfort 9-year-old Claudine, had a ripple effect. She took them to heart. They created heart wounds that she carried with her for years. And each time someone hurt her in some way, it reinforced this idea as a truth. As Claudine began to study the body and the brain in grad school and medical school, she learned how her brain was using that decade-old phrase, "You don't need people," to help her build a wall to protect herself. But that wall could not block God from seeing her and loving her. God knew who she was because he created her, but he also knew that wall she created would have to come down slowly. So he lovingly gave her the daily bread she needed in the form of divine breadcrumbs sprinkled throughout various parts of her life. He led her to his truth about who she was and who he created her to be. And he did it one layer at a time. And now he's working through her to help other women heal their heart wounds by treating the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Claudine, God, and the feminine genius. This is where faith and neuroscience meet. So, is God leaving divine breadcrumbs for you to follow? Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.